Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of How We Got Here. If you're new to the show, this is pretty straightforward. The title speaks for itself. We take a topic or a person, and we talk about how they or how it got to where it is today. I am one of your hosts, Jay. We've got Paul with us, and Paul, who else do we have?
Jay, we've got Cheryl Stebbins. She's nutritionist extraordinaire. I've known Cheryl for a long time. She really knows her stuff in this area. Cheryl, say hello to everybody.
Hello.
And why don't we get it out of the way here, and you can plug your employer and tell us a little bit about your background and what you do exactly.
Sure. So thank you guys for having me here. And so I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and so that is a little bit different than just a nutritionist. But I've been a dietitian for about 8 years now. So I did change careers a little later in my life, but it's definitely been my calling, and I love it. So, but I work for a company right now called Figure Weight Loss, and we are a medical practice that specializes in weight loss. We have how many? Like five doctors. Dr. Weckenbrock is our medical director, and he's amazing. And we have a few other doctors as well as nurse practitioners and physician assistants, and then we have like 4 dietitians on staff. So we really all work together. It's a very nutrition heavy based practice that also is combined with medicine to help with appetite suppression and things like that we do to help our patients get healthy and lose weight.
Do you guys have a website that if somebody wants to use your services, they can get more information or reach out to you guys at?
Absolutely. Figureweightloss.com. It's pretty easy.
And they're in Edgewood, right?
They are, yeah. Big blue building right off of Turkey Foot.
Well, I have to admit, I've used them before.
Have you?
I'm not a small guy, as you can see. They were very well nice, but you can't just be a little overweight, right? You have to meet a certain BMI percentage.
You do in order to get medication.
The medication, yeah.
Yeah, because legally we're required for there to be a certain BMI, certain weight, body fat percentage. There's lots of different things that can go along with that. But to meet with me, no. People can meet with me for weight loss, for lots of other things. I have a few other certifications as well, like FODMAPs.
What's that?
So FODMAPs stands for fermentable oligo and monosaccharides and polyols. Which,
I'm more confused.
Right?
Thank you. I shouldn't have asked the question.
So it's an acronym that stands for basically it's different carbohydrates that ferment in the gut and cause a lot of issues. It's basically people with IBS. A lot of times these sugars cause issues in the gut, and they just don't get digested properly. So if you go on like a low FODMAP diet initially, which you would work with me on how to do that. And it's basically going to be in fruits, vegetables, and lots of other carbohydrates. So it's healthy foods. It's not that they're bad foods. It's just they don't digest in a lot of people. And so then we work, with a low FODMAP first, and then we, get you eating more and more foods over time. So
Now, when Paul told me that we're going to have a nutritionist on here, I was like, well, now's my chance to get some free advice.
absolutely.
For a couple of things. You mentioned You mentioned people with IBS.
Mm-hmm.
My son was just diagnosed with Crohn's. He's 12.
Oh, okay.
Had to have an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, plus an MRI, blood draw. They thought it was celiac at first, but Crohn's is within the IBS, the irritable bowel syndrome family, right?
That is more inflammatory bowel disease.
Yes,
so
yes,
IBD.
that's what
Yes.
it is. That,
Mhm.
would a diet like that? First of all, in your experience, is having a special diet for Crohn's something that's regularly practiced?
Yes. So Crohn's is an inflammatory disease. And so actually that's one of my other certifications is I'm a certified LEAP therapist, which it sounds more
I don't
like
want to know what that means. It probably means some...
Right. I won't give you the acronym, but basically we have a blood test that it's an MRT test. So they test your blood against 176 foods and chemicals to determine what your body reacts to that causes inflammation in your body. And so then you work with me on, we start you off with really low inflammatory foods. We get your gut healthy again, and then we add in more and more. So, pretty much most anything when it comes to the gut, it's going to be, we have to eliminate stuff. We have to get your gut healthy. Then your body can usually handle more and more things, and we can figure that out. But the nice thing about this test is, a lot of elimination diets are, okay, we got to eliminate these things, but we really don't know what you can have, where this one tells you what you can. So it's really restrictive in the beginning, but it's only for about 2 weeks. And I have IBS, and which is kind of why I went down these different rabbit holes, but also for my patients, because a lot of them have these issues as well. And then they try to eat healthy, and all the healthy foods are causing all these other issues. And so, so I decided, if I'm going to help my patients, I want to know what I'm doing. But yeah, so within 2 weeks, I started feeling better. My knees stopped hurting. I'd had to stop running a few years ago, and I'm not back to running yet because I have too many issues with my knees, but I can do a squat without pain and go up and down stairs without pain. And that's huge. So it's another little area, but that for Crohn's, that would possibly be something, but there are definitely a lot of foods that can be more pro-inflammatory that we could talk about.
So you talk about the gut health, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's there's a blood work can be done. I definitely want to do that. You do that at that office?
We do.
Okay. We'll talk about that off air. Definitely going to book an appointment. But this show is called How We Got Here. And I think what's important for me to understand, and why I'm glad that you're here, is when I think nutrition, I'm thinking what I can and cannot eat. And growing up, I was told oatmeal is good for you, right? So you know what? I eat a lot of oatmeal cream pies. Not good for you, right? But there's been things where I've seen growing up. Milk's good for you. Milk's bad for you. So
eggs. How many times have eggs gone?
Yeah,
back
how many
and
times
forth,
have eggs gone good? So it seems like with
Yeah.
nutrition, there seems to be this kind of what's in and what's not, almost like a fad type. Is that something? Am I just imagining this, or?
You're definitely not imagining it. It's more of what are you hearing in the media and what's reality. So there is a huge discrepancy between those two things. In the media, they're going to hang on to something, and there's always going to be either a magic pill or there's going to be a magic food, and superfoods, and if you just eat this one thing, then all your worries will go away and you'll be this healthy person. And that's just not reality. Most of us that got unhealthy, we didn't get unhealthy by one food or one thing we did. And you're certainly not going to get healthy by that as well. So,
Yeah, pomegranate's not going to fix it.
No, pomegranate juice, it's not bad for you, but it's certainly not, the miracle elixir people wish it would be. So.
The thing that just I find startling about this whole thing, and we've all seen that picture, and it's circulated on social media for years and years. It's a beach picture, and it's from the 1970s, and you see thousands of people on the beach, and there's not one large person in the whole picture. And then you start thinking about, gee, when you look at group pictures from the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, you go to early 1900s, you don't see a lot of large people, if any. Right. And even when you see the pictures from the 1800s, still when post Civil War stuff like that, people have the same body makeup from like 1850 in pictures all the way up to 1970. And then something happens in the 70s, and I saw the statistic: obesity rates have now doubled from 1980. And what happened? What happened to the American diet in the 70s, or it probably started before that, 50s, 60s, whatever.
Correct.
But it kind of exploded in the 70s.
For lack
so
of
to
a
speak.
better term.
Yeah, exploded. Yeah, right. No pun intended. But what changed in an American diet that caused this dramatic metamorphosis?
So I think there was more than one thing, and it wasn't even just the American diet, but I think lifestyle is a big factor in all of this as well. But I think it started, even in the 50s. There, with Crisco,
TV dinners.
TV dinners, just trying to make things easy and convenient. Easy and convenient is usually highly processed. It's usually full of chemicals. It's usually going to have things in it that back in the 1800s and early 1900s, people didn't have. People grew a lot of their own foods, or, you walked to the market to get your food. You cooked things at home. You didn't DoorDash. You didn't,
Right.
You didn't run through a drive-through. You didn't do these things. The foods today are so highly palatable. And it's so much easier to overconsume and calorically dense foods that back, then people didn't eat that way. They didn't eat just, a 2,000 calorie meal that felt like you just barely ate something, without
Right.
realizing it. So yeah, foods have definitely changed so much, and, so many factors though.
We can blame science.
Yes.
Blame science. Although I would think nutrition is a science, because when I think of a science, it's something that's not, there's no definite answer, right? It's all every question, the answer is almost always, well, it depends.
Correct. Well, I think there's some definitive answers, but I remember when I was in school, my biochemistry teacher, and I think they pulled him out of retirement for this class, so he was really excited to be there. And he said to all the dietitians that were in there, just so you guys know, nutrition is not a real science, and it changes too much for us to even count it. And I was like, well, thank you very much.
Why did he say that?
Because it changes daily. Because the thing is I think it's still in its infancy of what we know, like about the gut. Everybody hears about the microbiome, and there's so many different things going on. Really from about the 50s, 60s, and 70s is when they started learning about nutrition and things. So it hasn't been that long. That we know that much, and we're still learning so much. And again, what we thought like eggs were bad, and now we know eggs are not bad, but they misunderstood what eggs do in the body, and just assumed, well, if there's cholesterol in an egg, then that means it's going to give you high cholesterol, which is not true. Your body makes cholesterol. You don't get cholesterol from your food. However, what you eat can influence that, but also genetics plays a huge part in that. Again, sedentary lifestyles, there's so many factors. So nutrition is one factor, and it's a pretty big factor, but it's not the end all be all of, why we're healthy or not.
Since you're mentioning cholesterol.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people out there, millions of people take statins.
Yes.
Okay, so where are we at now in terms of cholesterol? Because there's been it was a British doctor that actually did this, I think it was a Farmingham or Farmingdale study that isolated saturated fats. He said, these saturated fats are horrible. They raise your cholesterol. Cholesterol leads to plaque formation in the arteries. And this is the cause of the problem. And we got to take fats out of our diet.
Wasn't he paid by the sugar lobbyists, though?
That's a theory.
That's a theory.
That's the theory, but we'll get into that later.
But this guy has actually done a mea culpa and said, oops, cholesterol does not lead to all these formations of plaques and stuff like that. And just as you say, cholesterol is naturally forming in our bodies. Mm-hmm. And so where are we at now on cholesterol? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are still focused on cholesterol. How important is it? Is it important? Is it not important? Where are we at?
Well, I think it's absolutely important. I do think, there is some discrepancy depending on who you're talking to. The Heart Association still is set in some of their ways, and they haven't really changed what they think. I know from the research that I look into, and so what I say is probably going to be different than if you speak to a cardiologist. But, taking out trans fats, that was huge. Trans fatty acids are not good for the body. Those definitely clog up arteries. And those are by hydrogenated oils, those kinds of things. And so that's what
I assume a lot of processed foods.
Exactly. It's absolutely processed foods.
Like oatmeal cream pies.
And Crisco, as we talked about before, which they've changed their formula. However, there's still hydrogenated oils in there. But they're legally, they're allowed to say zero hydrogenated or zero trans fats if there is less than 1 gram, I believe, of trans fats, which there's never been anything that I've ever seen as a label before the they started changing things, that was over 3. So 1's still a fairly high number. And so
Why? I don't understand that. Why are they allowed? Is it because there's a margin of error? Are they allowed to go 0 trans? If it's in there, how can you say 0?
You know what? That is a very good question for probably more like lobbyists and things like that, because I would agree. I have 2 children with food allergies, and the labeling doesn't have to be extremely clear, even if there's dairy in a food, or even if there's certain things, they can just say seasoning or flavorings, and you don't know what that means. And it's a matter of if it's less than like 1%. But for somebody that could be anaphylactic, less than 1% is still very big and serious. And so I don't know why they're allowed to. That's
Money.
Yep, I'm sure.
Well, and we get in this conversation about the hydrogenated oils, and you had mentioned that they definitely form some plaques in arteries and things of that nature. Aren't they also highly inflammatory?
Oh, absolutely.
And what is the purpose, and what is the importance of inflammation in your body?
So, I mean, inflammation, is needed in order to heal, right? So the body sends all these white blood cells or whatever that to go and to either attack something that's in your body, and that causes inflammation. By doing so, when it becomes a bad thing is when that inflammation really doesn't go away, or it doesn't go completely down. And so that's when you have chronic inflammation. So everybody can have inflammation when you bang your knee, or exercise, you're going to get some inflammation, but it should go back down. Chronic inflammation is due to usually, lifestyle things, or, autoimmunes. There's lots of different things. Arthritis is an inflammatory condition as well. There's so many conditions, and it's just been increasing and increasing over the decades. I think, it's the root cause of even a lot of cancers and so many things that are going on with our health. And, that's why I decided to kind of go down that path of trying to find ways to reduce inflammation, because it really is one of the biggest.
So Tom Brady
hindrances.
obviously has made non-inflammatory diets a big deal. I mean, you really didn't hear about it too much in terms maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then Tom Brady began. And of course, he's selling a bunch of products now too.
Of course.
So he's making some money off this.
Mm-hmm.
But he kind of was the first person, I think, that to a wide group of people, nationwide audience, or even a worldwide audience, got talking about a non-inflammatory diet. So what can you expect in terms of, like, you talked a little bit earlier about being able to squat again and go up and down steps without pain, and based on your adjustments that you've made in your diet. So what kind of foods are really inflammatory? What kind of things can happen, like joint pain, things that, give us a list of that. And then if you could follow that up with, what kind of stuff should we be eating that is non-inflammatory and maybe even kind of eases the inflammation?
Yeah. So, processed foods are going to be a big one. Sugar, added sugars, so carbohydrates, let's first talk about carbohydrates for a minute, because everybody wants to vilify carbohydrates.
Atkins.
Correct.
Keto.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I got to be in ketosis all day, every day.
But see, now we have dirty keto, and I'm just going to do, a low carb diet.
What's dirty keto? Is that keto like sneaks out at night and doesn't tell its mom?
It's lazy keto.
Okay.
It's like I don't want to see if I'm in ketosis, which, a keto diet has its place, and I think it can be very helpful for some people sometimes. And I do know a decent amount of people that follow a keto diet, but here's the thing: it's not a diet at that point; it's a lifestyle. And so, anything that you consider short term to just have a short term goal like weight loss or something like that, it's never going to be beneficial long term. And so there are people that followed a keto diet for over 10 years or so, and they're very healthy. But what the media and what a lot of people think a keto diet is, and the reality of what it is, are also very different. So to do a healthy keto diet, you still need to add in a lot of vegetables. It's not just eating bacon all day. And, you do add in a decent amount of fat, because fat helps you stay satiated, and it does help you go into ketosis. But, the amount of protein. You still need to get enough protein in your diet. In our office, we don't promote a keto diet. We promote a lower carb diet, higher protein, and a moderate fat diet, which I think is more easier to follow. I think it's most people can do that without having to get rid of their favorite carb. Whether that's
so we kind of got on a little bit of a tangent. So sorry, it's my fault. See, I do it all the time.
right.
But what's that? Because I think you know what ketosis is. I know what ketosis is. Cheryl does. But I think a lot of people out there probably don't know what ketosis is.
You pee on a strip, that's all.
That is one way to see if you're in ketosis. Yeah. So ketosis is when your body basically, when you don't give it carbohydrates, that's its main source of energy is carbohydrates. So it converts carbohydrates into sugar in the body, which is glucose, is the sugar that it converts to, and uses that for energy. If it has excess energy, that's when it gets stored. It gets stored in your liver. It gets stored in your muscles as glycogen stores, and then the rest typically gets stored as fat. So if you're not using carbohydrates and you have a deficit, a low enough deficit, then your body will then use your fat stores and convert that into glucose to use as energy.
And that's when you're in ketosis.
Yes. And so that's the process. And that is very different than ketoacidosis, which I was confused with even when I first got out of school what the difference was, because that's when keto kind of went really big. And I was like, no, that's so bad. That's so bad. But ketoacidosis is a condition that like diabetics will go into when their blood sugar gets too low. And that's bad. You don't want to go into ketoacidosis.
Is that a risk for non-diabetics or people who are trying to follow the keto lifestyle, as you called it?
Not that I'm aware of. So no, I don't believe so. No, so ketosis is strictly converting fat into energy. So that's why you can lose weight doing it. But when people do it as a short-term diet and you add those carbs back in, the body goes, hey, I got carbs. I'm going to hang on to these. And, but so that's why it has to be a lifestyle change. But does that answer the question as far as what a keto diet is?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's when your body eats its own fat to get energy because you're not giving it carbs. But you're as you said, when you start to add those carbs back in because you don't give it up, is your body thinking, wait, I was without these for a long time. I can't spend them now. I got to save them.
That's my
that's kind of a rudimentary way to put it.
Exactly. That's basically what the body does. Yes. It's most people tend to gain more weight than they lost when they go off of it, sadly, and they work really hard and they're being so restrictive, and it's usually all for nothing when they go off of it. So that's why I don't promote it. I prefer something that's going to be more of a lifestyle change, long-term, healthy, getting that balance in.
And that's the important part, right? What you're mentioning now is it's got to be a lifestyle change. It can't be something you're going to do for 2 or 3 months and then go back to your old eating habits and think that everything's going to be fine.
Correct.
Right. And certain foods trigger different people differently. Isn't that right?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And I just know this from personal experience because Donna and I, back in the days when we were all training together at our old gym, I was up at 215 pounds. Donna was in her 160s, and we were exercising like crazy. Mm-hmm. We're eating what we thought was healthy, and the weight's not coming off. And so we started experimenting a little bit. And so we cut out wheat, didn't move the dial. Mm-hmm. We cut out sugar, didn't move the dial. We cut out dairy, and the weight came off so fast that we both thought something was wrong.
Really?
Oh yeah. We're like, well, this is getting a little scary because it's every week we're losing 1 pound, 2 pounds. In a month you're losing 8 and 9 pounds, and you're like, wait a minute. I'm still eating everything that I was eating, drinking everything I was drinking. The only thing I did was cut out a little bit of cheese and milk, and all of a sudden this is coming off. But I know other people that have tried to reduce dairy out of their diet, and it doesn't happen.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where the big gluten-free craze for a while, and it's still around quite a bit. A lot of people that reduced gluten started feeling better. And everybody just assumed it was gluten, and gluten is bad. And for some people, I mean, if you're celiac, gluten is bad. If you're not celiac, you might have a sensitivity, but it can also be other things. So there's also FODMAPs in wheat and in all grains. And so sometimes people will go off of, they do a gluten-free diet and then they feel better, but it was actually the FODMAPs that was in those foods that made them feel better, and it had nothing to do with gluten.
And could those be in other foods as well? Those
The
FODMAPs?
oh yes, they're in fruits, they're in vegetables, they're in lots of other foods. But if they, tended to eat a ton of, breads, which a lot of us do, like, you have a bagel in the morning, you have a sandwich at lunch, you have pasta at dinner, that's going to be probably your main culprit if that happens to be a FODMAP that bothers you.
Now, can we FODMAPs? I don't know what that is still. So don't say the acronym because I still want to understand. But is it like a chemical? Is it a?
It's sugars.
It's sugars. Okay.
Yep.
But is a FODMAP that's in a bagel would be the same one that's in a cheese,
Nope.
or they're just different types of sugars?
Correct. And that's why it's the acronym basically stands for all the different ones. And so everybody's body might, are going to be different. And I react to, certain ones. Oligosaccharides are a big one for me. And the other one I think is fructans. But
Well, we can't
else,
say that word.
Fructans.
Oh, okay.
Say it slower. But, somebody else, lactose intolerance. So dairy is a FODMAP. And so lactose is a sugar that's found in milk, and it's only found in milk. So, you may not have any other issues, and lactose may be the only one, and you just don't have the enzyme to break down lactose.
Can you get tested for that?
You can get tested for certain ones, like lactose you can. Fructans, I believe there's a breath test that can kind of tell you certain things. But
Cop did that to me once. Ended up in jail.
Yeah.
different one.
Oh, different breath test?
Different
Okay,
breath
sorry.
test. But yeah, so there's, but no, there isn't necessarily a test, which is why it's an elimination diet. And you kind of tend to go low FODMAP, and then you start with, like for me, onion and garlic, as sad as it is,
my
will
gosh.
kill me, kill my gut. They don't anymore though, because I've healed my gut. But when I was just doing low FODMAPs, I couldn't even have, any garlic, onion powders, anything in my foods, and I would bloat up and all kinds of things that we don't want to talk about right now.
We put garlic in everything here.
I used to too. And to learn how to eat without it, and it wasn't going to kill me, but it really made me feel bad. And so I slowly started learning how to cook without it. But then when I did the MRT test, and figured out that there's other things that are going on with me too. So once I was able to heal my gut, now I can have garlic I can do better with than onion. But it's still, it also has to do with like dose dependency. So how much you're giving yourself. So I can have a little bit, and all FODMAPs are that way. And even all inflammatory foods, we don't have to completely eliminate everything out of our diet that we think is bad. We just have to modify things. And there's some things we should have a lot more of, like our fruits and veggies. You're asking me what we should eat. Your fruits and veggies. Most people need a lot more vegetables in their diets than even fruits. Most people tend to like fruit and not vegetables. Veggies are powerhouse, and eating the rainbow, not in Skittles, but eating the rainbow, and getting those different colors, those give your body all different kinds of nutrients that we need. But I would say if anybody took away with one thing they should do, probably more veggies in your diet.
Can you overdo vegetables?
Well, you could definitely overdo the starchy vegetables like potatoes, corn, things like that, and those products that are made out of potatoes and corn. You could definitely overdo those. Very few other vegetables could you overdo. However, if you're displacing, a balanced diet, yes. So, you don't want to only eat fruits and veggies. Like even as a vegetarian, you still need to get enough protein. You need to get enough fats. So there's still different things you need to get. So variety is still good in all areas.
Now, I went down to the rabbit hole one day watching documentaries on Netflix, and one of the things that they were talking about that I found most interesting, and I'd be interested to know if you feel the same way about this. They were talking about fruits and fruit juices. And they were saying under no condition should you be drinking a fruit juice because the pulp's been removed. All the stuff that slows down the digestive process has been removed. And so when you drink like an apple juice or an orange juice, which we know so many people do because they think it's healthy and it's good for them.
Advertised on TV,
juicing.
part of a balanced diet,
Right.
or part of a balanced breakfast. Sorry,
But it blasts your glucose levels through the roof, right?
Absolutely. That's why they give diabetics orange juice when they start, their blood sugar gets too low because it pops your blood sugar back up quickly.
So basically what the premise of that show was, hey, you should eat fruits, but eat the fruit.
Eat the fruit, don't drink the juice. Yeah.
Don't drink the juice.
Right. So if you think about it, have you ever juiced an orange? You don't get very much juice from that orange, correct?
Right.
So you have to juice 5, 6, however, depending on how big your glass is. And that's when it gets to be too much. Nobody's going to eat 5, 6, 7 big oranges. That's, our body would stop us. But you can down that juice before your body has time to say, no, that's too much.
it's a lot of sugar.
Exactly. And it's too much sugar. And because you don't have, the fiber that's in there, to help slow down the absorption, fiber helps slow down the absorption, fats help slow down the absorption of foods. And so protein, very much so. So protein is why I promote that a decent amount, but we also need fiber. We need fats in our diet in combination with whether you're eating fruit or any other carbs, because it does help slow down the absorption. That's why if you have less refined carbs, that's going to be better because that glycemic load isn't, overpowering your body, and you have time to, your body has time to process it and not get overwhelmed. Throw insulin out, which is going to just pull all that sugar, store it as fat, and then your blood sugar drops, and then you crave more carbs, and then we just do this, highs and lows all day long.
And Paul is in shape, right? He's 87 years old, but he's
187.
got the body of a 20-year-old fitness model. I am not, right? But it sounds like what you're saying is, for example, Paul doesn't necessarily need to lose weight. I need to lose weight, right? But let's say Paul's having joint pain and achy, knee pain and inflammation. It sounds like what you're recommending is to try that elimination type of is maybe there's something going on with your gut health that's causing inflammation in your joints.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me, right? I don't know what, like something happened in here is making my elbow hurt.
So it has to do with how your body, so think about it as, if you want to look at it in the sense of like a food allergy, we all tend to understand that concept better. It's not an allergy, but you eat something like my son eating dairy. Well, most of us can eat dairy and we don't have horrific reactions. His body views that as something very bad, so it attacks. And then it causes this inflammatory, cascade of events that happens. And he doesn't go into anaphylactic shock, but he gets violently ill. And so if you think about that with any food, so it could be any food out there or any chemical for that matter. There's so many different things, and we bombard ourselves with so many things that aren't necessarily great for us, that are maybe low inflammatory. And then you bombard so much, the body starts getting overwhelmed, and then it starts reacting to things that maybe 5 years ago it didn't, but it got tired, it got worn out or whatever, and so then it decides that is an evil thing in your body, and so it's going to start attacking that. And that's where inflammation comes from, is the body trying to attack these foreign substances that it views as bad for you. And so whether it truly is bad or not, and that's where everybody's body can be different. There are things, and that's where the science comes in with nutrition and with but everybody's body's a little bit different on how they react to these things. And that's where the gut microbiome, which we still are in the infancy of understanding that. And we know that there is a connection in there, gut brain axis. There's so many different things. There's even more axes, if that's a word.
Axes. We'll
there
say
we
that.
go.
I don't know if that's a real word either, but
that goes on in the body. And so the body really, it functions as a whole, and we want to compartmentalize. I think nutrition is this and exercise is this, and, or, sleep is that. But all of that works together. If we don't get enough sleep, your body is not healing, because we heal when we sleep. And, and if you're not healing when you sleep, then what you put in your body may overreact to, even though it shouldn't. And, so it becomes this vicious cycle. And, those are the things that it's an all encompassing, wanting healthier lifestyle that we should be.
So there's no magic quick fix. Is that what you're saying? That hurts.
I'm sorry, but no.
I can't take a pill and wake up tomorrow 100 pounds lighter.
Nope. Although I do have patients that will come in and they hope for that.
Well,
as
there was
well,
this
but
big
no.
thing in the 1940s called the tapeworm pill. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I heard it worked like a charm.
Worked for what though?
I had mentioned Tom Brady earlier,
Yeah.
and one of the things that he has put forward is not to eat nightshades because they're inflammatory and specific. And I love tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
I love peppers. I love all that stuff. Those are all nightshades.
Mm-hmm.
And according to his diet, those are highly inflammatory. Does that science back that up?
There's some research to support that to a certain degree, but it's not everybody's body. That's the thing. So people with autoimmune, that is something that we do commonly recommend is try. And so here's the thing: there's a bunch of foods in the nightshade family, and I have looked up why they call it nightshade. It has nothing to do with night or shade.
That's all I'm
it's a
thinking
weird
about right
word,
now.
right? But
That's what is a nightshade.
right.
It sounds like a very poisonous plant to me.
Right. And basically that's the idea behind it, but it's not. But these are foods that can be pro-inflammatory, but not in everybody. So, but potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and I might be missing one. But those foods for some people, but here's the thing, maybe 2 or 3 of those foods bother somebody and causes inflammation, but maybe not all of them do. The really cool thing, not that I'm sitting here trying to promote this, but I am, the MRT test that we do, we actually test for all of those vegetables, but we also test for the chemical that's in all those nightshade vegetables are solanine. And solanine is what causes the inflammation. And so we actually specifically test for solanine to see. So that is where these elimination diets, like, you get really restrictive and you're hoping it's going to help. And then you have to add a food in at a time where with that test, you already know. And so for me, it was kind of high for solanine. So I did eliminate all of them. And then I slowly started adding in, and potatoes don't seem to bother me in small quantity. And once again, it's that dose dependent reaction. So if you give yourself a little bit of things, usually our bodies can handle that, and it's not going to cause a big cascading, inflammatory event. It'll just, work on it and move on. But you don't have to eliminate all those things typically forever.
One of the big things that you're seeing now in terms of fads, and this, because I think diets are just like, there's a new one that comes out all the time and people jump on it because they're trying to get help for themselves. Mm-hmm. And they're not thinking in the long term in a sense, but you're seeing right now probiotics are being marketed left and right. What's your stance on that? Good, bad, indifferent, doesn't help at all? I mean, a lot of stuff that you take, supplements and stuff, you just wash right through your body.
Correct. Yeah. So probiotics, like I said before, is kind of the whole microbiome is not fully understood. There is research that supports certain strains of probiotics that can help with certain conditions. And so depending on what you have, like C. diff, there's certain strains that can help specifically with that. What is promoted out there in supplemental form is going to be, well, we're going to give you all of these certain strains and we're going to hope that's what you need and give that to you. And there are certain strains that they do find tend to be a little bit more helpful, but it's still a bacteria. And if you have an overabundance in the gut of any bacteria, that's bad. Because they're going to take over and they're going to cause this issue or this issue. So we need that balance, and we need that. That's where the microbiome needs a little bit of everything. We need the yeast. There's, we all have all different bacteria in there that aren't good for us, but it's the good ones that keep them under control.
So in order for me to try to understand what you're saying right now, because I don't know what a probiotic is, I don't know what an amateur biotic is, I don't. But some things that I try to, in order for my brain to comprehend what you're saying, I try to find some type of analogous situation. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier, like, to just give you everything and hope one of it works. But you've also talked about, these tests where they're actually trying to figure out, okay, what's right for you as an individual. Mm-hmm. And I've got family members, people that I'm close to that have mental health issues, depression, anxiety, and older family members, whereas when depression and anxiety first started to kind of be more talked about. It was just throw medication at them, and if this one doesn't work, this one works, this one works. And now I've got younger family members where they're taking, they're doing blood work, they're doing tests to see kind of your chemical balance and what might be a better fit for you versus trying to just throw everything at you and see what works. And why I think that's analogous to what you're saying is he talked about the fad diet. So just throw this at, throw this at, throw this at, maybe this works, maybe that works. And you're talking now about specific tests for like you as an individual and what might be good for you. Am I way off base here, or am I close as far as my understanding of what you're talking about? As far as helping somebody be more healthy, maybe not wanted to lose weight, but maybe wanted to feel better.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where this test is not. I mean, I actually lost 10 pounds, and I'm pretty sure I didn't need to lose a ton of weight, but I had gained about 10 pounds in a few months, and I hadn't changed my diet. I was still exercising, and that's when I started feeling worse and worse. And so when I went through the MRT test and did LEAP, it kind of just shut off of me because most of that was water that my body was just holding on to, and that was causing the inflammation. I believe you. Yeah. So yes, so this test is just a little bit more specific versus trying to go into it blindly, which I'm not saying that, and this test isn't for everybody. It is a very restrictive test, especially early on. But there are definitely certain foods, like you were saying, nightshades. There's a whole protocol for people with autoimmune. The autoimmune protocol is what it's actually called. And they found dairy nightshades, grains. There's lots of foods that tend to inflame people with autoimmune, or was it the cause? Not so sure. Like, they really don't know why there's so many people with so many more autoimmune disorders coming out now too. But my theory is that, just everybody's body's just getting tired, and these things just start wreaking havoc. And so you have autoimmune, you have food allergies. There's a rise in adult onset food allergies.
These things didn't seem to exist before. Why do you think we're starting to see, these food allergies? Did they exist before and we just ignored them? Or do you think there's some bigger ongoing, something is causing our bodies to shift and react differently, specifically in America? Because I've had friends of mine who can't eat bread here. Like, they can't, they're celiac, right? They can't eat bread. They go over to Italy and they can eat pasta all day and feel just fine. It seems like there's something different to the United States versus the rest of the world. Am I? Absolutely.
There's, I mean, regulations are different here. I think we have a lot looser regulations when it comes to additives that are allowed in foods and any products. There's so many different things, even, whether it's allowed or whether it's just the way things are processed. I think in Europe and other places, you have thousands of years of history of these things being made a certain way, and people tend to stick to a lot of that tradition, even if they've modernized it to a certain degree. I think in the United States, we're babies. We kind of pick from different things from our heritage and this and that, but then we kind of make up our own thing, and it's not always a good thing.
So Mama over in Italy is not adding sucratate monochloride 3 to her sourdough?
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, in most of Europe, you cannot have genetically modified foods. Mm-hmm. And now, and that brings up a whole...
that's like a whole different day. Yeah. I mean, that's... Because, I mean, most food is genetically modified. It's just to what degree and how. And, farmers have been genetically modifying, our produce as well as even animals over the centuries, like pigs. I mean, they got rid of trichinosis by genetically modifying pigs. They didn't do anything weird chemically. They just started finding the pigs that didn't have it, and they bred those pigs. But that's technically a genetically modified pig.
Well, we've all seen those pictures though, where they put the corn cob that's organic and then the corn cob that's GMO supposedly, and like the birds only eat the kernels off the organic corn cob.
Right. Yes. Well, and so some of that, there is definitely like pesticide resistant plants I know that they have out there. Those ones kind of scare me if you're able to over pesticide. But there's others that they genetically modified it to where the bugs don't. There's a chemical in there that was already in there, but they just make it overly pronounced, I guess. And the worms that would normally be eating, say, the corn or this or that, they don't like that, or it will kill them. So that protects them. And it's not causing harm to us by doing that kind of genetic modification. So I think it's oversimplifying by saying, GMOs are bad. It's, well, what are they doing? What kind of GMO is it? So I think there are some that, aren't so good, but I don't think all are bad.
What are the GMOs that the Europeans find so offensive?
You know what? Honestly, that's a good question.
American GMOs.
Yeah, American
GMOs.
Yeah.
It's from America. It's bad.
And I do think a lot of it is the pesticide resistant things, where, we're able to just throw a ton of chemicals down on these plants, and it won't kill the plant, but it'll kill everything around it, and, go down in our rivers. And
Is this, so it sounds like processed food. To me, it sounds like processed food in America, the United States. I won't say America because Canada's part of America, but the United States, it sounds like you're saying it's kind of, the science is showing that it may have changed kind of our body chemistry and our gut health, but we weren't really research. We weren't really look into that not too long ago, right? Is that what you're?
Yes, and there's so many things that we thought were healthy. Back in the 50s when they started promoting low fat, and they thought all fat was bad, and so then everybody went low fat and carb high, and it didn't matter the amount of sugar or how much of that stuff they were taking in. They just thought they had to do low fat, and then you introduce high fructose corn syrup, and especially in sodas, and that has another chemical change in the body that it took them. They just recently are figuring out that the body, the way that the brain actually registers certain foods, it's that causes another chain reaction of we want it, becomes almost
well, a lot of those foods, like the sugars and the high fructose corn syrups, they'll light up the brain like cocaine and heroin.
Yes, that's what I was exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they do MRI studies on it, and it's like it just lights up the brain.
Really?
And that's those highly palatable foods. So usually, when especially when you combine high fat and high sugar, that's when the body goes, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I like this."
So high fructose, I mean, it's high fructose corn syrup has got a really bad rap.
Yes.
Is it inherently bad, or are we just over consuming?
Mostly over consuming. Again, our bodies can handle, if you have a soda that has high fructose corn syrup once a week, your body will be fine. You're not going to,
12 ounce,
cause
20
anything.
ounce,
Either one.
2 liter.
Not a 2 liter.
Okay, not a 2 liter. I don't drink pop anymore. I did give that up.
Good.
Haven't lost any weight, but
Well,
actually,
we'll talk about that.
I was at 350. I got down to 280. Got
you
hurt.
go.
Now I'm back up to 290. I can't wait to get back to the gym. So I find it interesting that so far we've talked about, these fad diets that have come in the past. We made a little joke about tapeworm. That really was a thing.
Yes.
Atkins, keto, and then Tom Brady selling his, what the correlation I'm finding between those diets and what you're saying right now to us with the mud flaps.
FODMAPs.
Yeah, those is those seem kind of to focus on an overall diet, like just an overall diet.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like what you're saying is, while the science is in its infancy, is we're now focusing on the individual, not just kind of this throw spaghetti at the wall and let's see what happens. Try this diet. We're now actually studying you as a person and seeing what's right for you. And also, because it is in its infancy, we have to do kind of this elimination type.
Well, I think that's when you already are having issues. We don't need to.
Trust me, I am.
But the goal is, we start feeding our children a healthier, balanced, less processed diet. We start eating a healthier, less processed diet to begin with. And a lot of times just by eating healthier, moving more, and, getting enough sleep, all of those factors, that might take care of it. You might not need to go and do an extra study. You might not need to have all these extra things. I mean, people can, I don't know if it's technically reversing diabetes, but you can go into remission or whatever with diabetes just by losing weight and adopting a
Type 1,
healthier
type 2?
type 2.
Okay.
Type 1 is yeah.
You're born with that.
Correct. Well, yeah, or it develops at least at a certain point.
Well,
But
that's one thing. I had a friend growing up. He has type 1 diabetes. So you're born with that, but he had no idea until he got to college, and he started being less active and started eating a lot more pizza.
Right.
But because he ran his entire life, was a very healthy guy, and
I think you're born with it, but I don't know that it always comes out. Like, I think, certain events or things will trigger it at different ages. Usually it's in childhood, but so I have heard of people not being diagnosed until they're in their 20s or so.
So we've talked a lot about the processed foods.
Yes.
In this conversation already. When I was researching this topic, one thing that jumped off the page at me was what's called emulsifiers or stabilizers.
Yes.
These things, now, just for people out there, what they're intended to do is they stop food from separating as it's sitting on the shelf or as it's being transported and things like that. Think of this, the analogy that came to my mind, it was like what they do to a dead, when a person dies, the body starts to decompose. They use formaldehyde to slow or stop that process. Mm-hmm. That's what these emulsifiers kind of came off to me as like, because they do it for ice cream. They use it for bread, and it helps the texture. It helps the taste. It keeps it stable. It keeps it looking good for a longer period of time, which increases the shelf life. But then I was looking at the stuff that this stuff does. It alters your microbiome, which we've already talked about that not being a good thing. It elevates your blood glucose, but it causes hyperphagia. And hyperphagia is an abnormal appetite for food. So they're actually putting stuff in our food that will make you crave more food.
that's like putting cocaine in your cocaine.
I mean, it's, if you were like
That's crazy.
an evil scientist, I mean, this is
It works.
something right, perfect, right? I mean, if you're in the food industry, you're actually putting something in the food that makes people crave more food.
And that's going to be more of those highly processed foods, because there's emulsifiers like mustard. Dijon mustard is a great emulsifier, and that's why they put it in vinaigrettes. So
what's an emulsifier?
Emulsifier is what kind of, it's basically getting stabilizer for ingredients. Like, with a vinaigrette, you're going to have oil and vinegar or water base or whatever, and they don't necessarily want to go together. So you need something that's going to bring them together and keep them together and make it cohesive. And so there are healthy versions of that, and then there are some not so healthy versions of that. And so, correct. The more processed, the more ingredients that are on that list, typically there's going to be a few things in there you probably don't really want to choose.
Well, like soy lecithin, that's in everything.
That's an emulsifier. Correct.
Mm-hmm. And is that a good one, bad one?
Too much of it?
Soy is its own topic as well. Soy is very controversial.
Right.
I don't think it definitely has been vilified as well. I think it's once again fine depending on the form. When you're eating, I love edamame. And it's soybean is all that is, and that is okay to eat. But when you start breaking it down and you start adding it into everything, and you have soy lecithin and soybean oils, and you have all these processed things, and you're bombarding the body with this one product, the body starts going, okay, this is too much. And that's when it starts overreacting to things. When one of the foods when I did my MRT test was chicken, that was higher inflammatory for me. And I was like, but I love chicken and I eat chicken every day. And that's when I went, oh, okay, that's probably the problem. I'm eating chicken all day, every day. And my body finally, because it was already inflamed and having issues, it went, okay, now we're going to add this to that list of things that I don't want want you to have because you're doing too much of it. And so our body starts overreacting to these things. So I think soy is one of those things. But I mean, if you look at, Asian cultures and the amount of soy that they have and how they're some of the healthiest cultures in the world, it doesn't make sense that it's soy. It's what we mostly, probably Americans, have done to soy to break it down and, have to take it out of its, whole parts and do these things to it and adding chemicals to it and all this stuff, that's when it becomes not so healthy. So yes, and that's, there, I could go on.
So let's do this. We talked a lot about, let's define what processed food is.
So, and that's actually a very good thing to define, because processed isn't always bad either. Processing means you're just changing it from its original form. How much you're changing it is when we start getting into what you don't want to have so much of. So, processing your lettuce that it's been, cut and washed and put in a bag, that's basically it's processed, right? But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Now, if they start adding chemicals to make sure it doesn't deteriorate and start doing all these other things, that's when it's more processed. So it just depends on, how processed it is and what they're doing in that process. That is what you need to look at and decide how much of this do I want. So, the closer to its natural form is what we want to have most of the time.
So if I make a loaf of bread at home, or let's say I want to make my own pasta, right? I'm doing flour and egg. Let's just say you go buy pasta from the store and there's 35 ingredients. Is it safe to say the more ingredients, the more processed it is?
Yeah, typically, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now that could be, if you got a flavored something or other and there's a bunch of seasonings and stuff. And so it doesn't matter if you can't understand what half of those ingredients are, that's when I usually recommend you put it back on the shelf. But if it's just a bunch of seasonings and they're, giving you a modified version of something, if you go down the pasta aisle, there's pasta made out of everything now. And most of them are okay. And actually, typically pasta is like 2 ingredients. It's usually durum or semolina flour and salt. And that's typically what you find in most pasta. But when they start adding a bunch of stuff, and you just have to look, are they adding protein and it's, lentils or whatever? That's not a bad thing. But
reading labels is like, I do this now at the grocery store all the time because it's like become just like almost interesting, fascinating. So I went to buy breadcrumbs the other day because I wanted to make some breading. And there's like 25 ingredients in breadcrumbs. And I'm like, this is like old bread that they should be just ground up breadcrumbs. And it's got 25 ingredients. And like you said, I couldn't understand what half of them were.
Correct.
It was like a chemistry test. And I'm like, this is insane in that regard. But what about, red meat has been vilified. And that was one of the, especially when they were trying to get fats taken out of the diets, stuff like that, red meat was one of the main culprits. But one of the facts that I learned in researching for this was that Americans are actually eating 1/3 less red meat, beef, since 1970. But it's since 1970 that we've seen these just horrific changes in the way people look and in their body composition. So where are we at on red meat?
So red meat, it's harder to digest. It is, it definitely is more pro-inflammatory. But again, in small consumption, it is fine. So you can have it in your diet. It just shouldn't be every single day. And then once again, when people are having it, in what form are they having it? Is it through a drive-through or are they making it themselves? And how are you cooking it? And there's so many factors that can go into whether is it just the red meat or is it everything that goes along with that red meat?
Red meat plus.
Exactly.
Red meat plus whatever chemical ingredient they've added.
Well, right. Or, even the side dishes that go with it. Or is it a burger that, that you then have, white bread and you're adding, whatever,
secret sauce.
Yes. And if it's a good secret sauce or not. But yes, so that's where all of that stuff, I remember, I won't mention the fast food chain, but finding out that their ground beef wasn't really all just ground beef. They also there was like soy products and there was all this stuff where people think that they're getting just ground beef, but it was cheaper to add all these other things to it to,
basically they're making a larger yield.
Exactly.
They're essentially cutting it.
Yes. Right. And that kind of came out, it's been, easily 10 years or so ago. And I think they still do it, but then they just had to own up to it,
Yeah, there's a taco chain that had the same thing happen to them.
Yeah, I think might be the same one I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And
that's why when we eat out, like I eat out, I'm not saying people shouldn't eat out, but how often do you eat out? Where do you eat out? And what are you choosing when you go there? A lot of that really plays a factor into, the overall health of an individual. If you're eating fast food twice a day, every day, and on top of it, you're drinking, all these sugar drinks, and it starts bombarding the body too much. But you can have any one of those things even on a weekly basis, and it's okay. It's just when we start adding all of them together and we start having it all too much.
what do you say, or what's your advice to those people out there where they know if they go and get this burger from this fast food joint, they know without a doubt that they're going to feel like absolute shit as soon as they eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they can't stop. They can't not go.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like an addict.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know smoking this crack pipe is not going to make me feel good, but it's not enough to stop them from doing that.
Right. But in the moment it will. And that's what keeps that's what they crave and they want. Right.
Yeah.
And, there are definitely, there's eating disorders, that play a part into some people's, conditions where they can't control that. It's also, we don't know what else to do. So that's what we do. So sometimes that can be the case. Those highly palatable foods, if you start giving your body what it actually needs, the body starts craving that more. And so I recommend small changes over time. Like I said before, if you're going to make one change, add in more vegetables. If you can get vegetables in, even at breakfast, throw it in with your eggs. Throw some spinach in there. I make smoothies and I throw spinach or kale in my smoothie.
I'm afraid to ask you a question, only because I think it might ruin me.
What?
So I don't like vegetables, but there's this thing that I found called veggies and such.
Okay.
Basically, it's blueberry muffins made out of vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't heard of that particular brand. No.
Okay.
I have heard of veggie muffins. It's just like you have veggie straws.
No, yes.
No.
Hey.
Now that product, I'd have to read the label. Again, reading
Well,
labels. I know. If it is actually all made out of veggies, but what they typically will do is they do whatever the product, like veggie straws is a potato chip that they shape and color to look like a vegetable, but they put the color of tomato or they put the color of spinach.
Why can they call it a veggie straw then?
Because it looks like a veggie. They're not telling you that's
It's
gosh. Marketing.
I don't eat
Been
veggie
sucked
straws.
in?
I don't eat veggie straws, but
yes. So, if you make them, if you read the ingredients and almost all those ingredients are like veggies with maybe a binder of like eggs to put them all together, might actually not be a bad thing. I doubt most people would eat it, to be honest, because then that's kind of a frittata.
I don't know, but it's delicious though.
There's this whole, and I guess we could probably, and I know you said you could talk for hours about this stuff. So I don't think we want to do a 10-hour podcast, but
our listeners would love it.
Yeah. Right. But there's also this whole concept now. It's gaining popularity. The Gracie family, which is involved in jiu-jitsu, has actually been practicing this since like the early 1900s. But the concept of food combinations and how certain foods work together and how it's eating foods to other foods which are not a good combination actually blow your body up. Is there some truth to that? Is this started with a French naturalist that wrote a book and then they modified it, and now you're starting to see this mainstream where people are saying, I'll give you an example, like milk and bananas go together. Okay.
Do you know why they go together? Like, what do they say?
Well, it just, the body processes it better. You don't get, upset. You don't get that sick feeling and stuff like that. But same way, you wouldn't put orange juice and milk. Does not go together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, when it comes to nutrients, we need fat soluble vitamins, for instance. we need fat in order for our body to actually absorb those. So vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin E. So when people eat vegetables like orange veggies that have, you need to have fat to go with it in order for your body to absorb it. So definitely there's combinations. You shouldn't just eat carrots all day. You need to have that variety. Specific combinations, I mean, I would definitely agree. Like, you don't want to put milk and orange juice together. That will curdle in your stomach and probably make you feel pretty bad. So there's definitely some truth to that. And maybe they've, done a lot more. It sounds like they've been doing that for, you said, over 100 years and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's some truth to that. Whether there's scientific evidence to support it, I don't think there's scientific evidence to support everything. That's a good idea and can be helpful. I think a lot of anecdotal things can be good as well. To me, some of it is common sense when you have to look at it, and you have to look at the science and the research behind it and understand how the body works to see if that makes sense. So not just going, randomly going, well, I think that makes sense, so therefore I'll do it. So you still need a scientific, I guess, mindset when you look into things like that, of how do these foods, how would they go together, or how would they not, or how does the body process and work? And, I've heard things, everything from you should never eat meat with your vegetables because it takes meat so much longer for your body to digest. So then the veggies will sit in your gut and rot. And that is not true. So,
wow.
So, but if
Sounds
somebody
like
that
something
doesn't,
my mom would have told me growing up.
right. But if you don't understand how the body works and how the stomach and the digestive system works, that might make sense to you, and you might believe it and, and try to do that and never put those two things together. And, so I'd have to look at that, and I'd be happy to. And
I'm going to speak for every fat person out there that's listening when just so that they know that when Paul said milk and bananas, he was not referring to a banana milkshake from UDF.
No,
Okay?
no, it was not.
No, he was not. Okay. I know that's what you were thinking. You're like, oh my gosh, that's good for you. I'm going to UDF right now. So yeah, let's not eat banana milkshakes all day. But it sounds like too that what you're referring to in general is just not just throwing everything out there to see what sticks, right? It's just really pay attention. If you're noticing a change, and you want to do it on your own, you're kind of just take it back. And I think why a lot of these fad diets, and why it's almost like nutrition has changed so much over the years is people want to be, I think people generally want to be healthy. They want to be fit. But the TV flashes and this, hot guy or hot woman up there is talking about this new workout, this new diet, is we take it for face value. And we want to be, as Americans, I think we want to be so fit overnight almost. It's like, oh, well, this new ab cruncher machine, well, that's the ticket.
right.
But you do ab crunchers while you're eating donuts, and it's just not. Like I said, I've gone on a journey of losing over 70 pounds, and it doesn't happen overnight.
No. And you didn't put those 70 pounds on overnight either. So
No, I blame my mother. Because I don't know about you, but growing up, for me, at least it was always, finish your plate. I don't care if I put
Clean Plate Club,
extra portions that you really shouldn't have had.
right.
It was always clean your plate. And my kids are very healthy, very fit. And it's always because I've always trained them at a minimum, stop when you're full.
Yes.
Because for me, why I think I gained so much weight was I would go, it seemed like portion sizes increased. So I'd go to a restaurant, I'd order the chicken and steak combo with 2 sides plus a salad. I'm like, well, my brain is telling me what you're going to get a whooping. You don't eat every single bit of that. And there were times where I would be physically ill and throwing up after eating because my mentality was, you got to finish your plate. And what I've learned is it's really hard for me to change that mentality. So I just make a smaller plate, but
right. Yep. Making a smaller plate and, and different combinations of what you're putting on that plate. So if you're making half your plate vegetables, quarter of your plate protein and a quarter of your plate carbs, you can finish your plate.
Stop shoving vegetables down my
I
throat.
am always, all day, every day.
I've got muffins for that.
And there's, there is no magic pill to that. But, the closest, if people are looking for a diet to follow, just to have a game plan, Mediterranean diet, hands down, over and over, year after year, research is done, and they always come back to the Mediterranean diet, which isn't a specific diet. It's not, but it is basically eating as those that live around the Mediterranean Sea eat. And it's definitely more balanced. It's fresh foods. It's lots of veggies, fruits, meat, but meat's not the main staple of the plate of that meal. And smaller portions, all those things, olive oil, not such highly processed foods. They go to the grocery store usually 2-3 times, a week. They go to the market. I'm sure it's not the big, giant mega stores like we have. And you don't have to do every one of those things, but just even looking at that and trying to adopt those kind of ideas is a huge step in the right direction. And, wherever you're at, there's always room to improve your diet and to eat healthier. And what everybody's idea of what health is or what healthy is, especially when it comes to nutrition, everybody has a different idea of what that is. And that's, my job is to meet you wherever you're at and then just bump you a step forward, and we'll just keep doing baby steps. But when people try to go from A to Z and overhaul their diet, that's usually when things go awry and they don't last very long.
And everybody thinks they're an expert on nutrition for some reason. I've had guys
yes,
way bigger than me go, well, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. Like, well, maybe you should listen to your own advice. But it seems like everybody is almost wants to be an expert on nutrition because they saw a TV commercial and they saw, an ad. But you are actually an expert.
I am. And I have people that do the same thing.
I don't
with me,
like you
so
because you're telling me to eat my veggies.
But we can work on that. I promise.
No, I'm gonna read those ingredients on that because I promise. Like I said, I thought oatmeal cream pies were good for you growing up because I thought oatmeal was good for you, right?
Right.
So, my doctor said I need to eat more veggies, and I saw veggie muffins. I was like, boom, got it, easy.
And I'm not saying they're bad. I'd have to read them. And a good little we highly recommend little egg muffins, little mini frittatas, and so that's not a bad thing if that's what that is.
They're not.
I just doubt it is.
But there's no. They're gluten free, so I know there's no It's got a vegetable base, like a cauliflower base, I think is what it has.
Okay.
But I'll read the ingredients. So what if I read the ingredients? What is a no? Like, what should I be like? Okay, these aren't. I
would say the first thing I would look at is the added sugar, what the total carbohydrates are. Now,
is this going to be true for kind of almost everything?
Yes.
Okay.
Added sugars are the things that you want to minimize. You don't have to eliminate. So if it says 1-2 grams of sugar in there, and it depends on what you're eating it and how you're eating it and what you're eating it with. So, again, it can be part of a healthy diet, but whether it's the biggest part or whether it's a small part, whether it's an occasional part, that's where all those different foods you have to kind of look at and determine where they fit in your lifestyle and in your diet to, lead you to healthier eating.
And I think what people need to understand, and I know, Jay, you and I talked about this off air this afternoon, the sugar industry actually lobbied Congress in the 70s to remove their labeling as to what percentage of the recommended daily allowance of sugar was in the products that sugar was being put in, because they basically replaced fat with sugars to give it flavor, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And I know for a guy, it's something like 34, 35 grams of sugar per day you're supposed to consume. That's your recommended daily allowance.
Maximum. Not that you should have that much. That's
and women is less.
Is less.
But you can blow through that. So
easy.
fat, yeah.
With a Coke.
One soda.
A couple donuts, whatever. I mean, it takes nothing. And one of the things that I saw, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong, because again, I don't buy everything I see on the documentaries. But in terms of refined flour, your body from the neck down interprets that as sugar.
Oh yeah, I mean it gets converted to glucose very, very quickly. You know, so that's where
refined flour is
white flour.
white. Yeah, white flour.
White flour.
You know, one of the best things about being a podcast, though, so you can pretend you're asking the question so the listeners understand, right?
So yeah, so white flour, and that's where whole grains come in. And whether you're doing a gluten-free version or you're doing actual wheat flour, if it's refined, it's still refined. And so that's again where people will think, oh, well, gluten-free is so much healthier. Well, no, it depends on what you're doing with gluten-free. I mean, you know, I think Skittles are gluten-free. That doesn't mean we should be eating those all day.
That's
so,
true. I mean, I think there's actually a kind of a lawsuit going on over in Europe over Skittles and whether or not they can be classified as food, right?
maybe
Like, as far as safe for human consumption, I think there is.
Oh, I think
the argument is it's they're arguing it's a petroleum
product,
Yes.
not a food.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Taste
actually
the
think,
rainbow. Make
one of
some
my
gasoline.
other dietitians, Nikki, I think was just telling me about that. So
And for the folks out there that think white flour looks really good, the reason it's white is because it's been chemically bleached.
yes.
Yeah.
So what should we be looking for? Let's say you want to use flour. Are you looking whole grains, whole?
Yes. And there's a variety of whole grains. I think varying up even your grains is important. That is another thing that I learned with my body is I was doing too much wheat. So now I have a little bit of spelt. I do oats. So when you were saying, you know, oatmeal and oats, they're not necessarily bad, but even oatmeal, depending on if you're doing instant and you're adding all the, and, you know, getting the flavored kinds
Brown
with all the
sugar
sugar
and butter.
all of that stuff. And depending, I mean, it can go into food dyes and all these things that, you know, makes it a little bit less healthy, a lot less healthy in most of the cases. But oatmeal in and of itself isn't bad. But what you're putting with it and how you're eating it and how much you're eating still matters. But I think, you know, varying up, whether it's grains, whether it's veggies, fruits, even proteins, varying up your proteins, not just eating the same things all the time. That gives the body a different nutritional profile to work with. That, you know, it gives a whole foods kind of an idea.
We're not plugging Whole Foods here.
No, sorry, I wasn't meaning that.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Not the store.
Not the store. Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Now, if Whole Foods wants to be a sponsor, that's a different story.
Hey, you know what? Give me a call. We got an email address.
After, yeah.
So look. You see, Paul. You know he's very old school. He's got a lot of notes there. Mm-hmm. What else you got on that notepad?
Well, okay. Here's a fun fact. So when I was looking up the history of food and stuff like that, and we think about American food, how it's been affected by the waves of immigration, right? Mm-hmm. And with every wave that came over, they brought their foods, they brought their cooking methods and things like that. So I was kind of startled to find out that actually 60% of the food that's consumed worldwide is from the Americas originally. So you could actually argue that Native Americans, because they were all cultivating all these foods, that they are actually have the biggest impact on food worldwide. And it's vegetables, it's grains, even some meats, fruits. I mean, all this stuff that I'll give you an example. We associate tomatoes with the
Italians.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Except they're not. The tomatoes originally are from the Americas and were brought over to Europe.
Yeah, so there you go, you Italians. You're not better than us.
So I just thought that was kind of like an interesting fact, you know.
That is interesting. Yeah. I would not like you associate tomatoes with Italians. I mean, pasta, pizza sauce. That's a tomato base, right? So basically, America's came up with pizza.
And what's more American than apple pie?
Tomatoes.
Except this: apples are from Kazakhstan. And the pie crust was made in England.
So funny.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just you.
And now it's made by Marie Callender's. It's got 45 chemicals in it.
That's right.
So I think this is how I'm summarizing what your message is. Because the whole premise of the show is how we got here. And we've talked about how the history with it, with, you know, the sugar lobbyists, let's just be clear. Sugar's bad for you in excess.
Correct.
right? It sounds like everything that you've said tonight, there's never been, oh, this is bad for you.
Right.
It's always been, don't eat too much, you fat ass. You didn't say that. In
Would
my head,
never
in my
say
head,
that.
you said that. So that I think that's a main point that's come across a lot is anything that Paul and I are brought up. You're like high fructose corn syrup is, you know, it's not inherently bad for you, but it's easy to consume a significant amount of it.
Correct. And one person may get triggered, and if they have a little bit, they're going to, you know, go overboard and they can't control themselves. Well, then maybe it's bad for that person.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's bad for everybody. But
So-
yes.
So that's point number one.
Yes.
And then point number two is with the history of nutrition in the United States, it's all been so up until recently focused on kind of the newest fad diet. Whereas now we're actually starting to try to understand the actual science of it. So your professor may have been right back when, how old are you, 25?
Oh, I wish.
Right? So back when
Double
you're in
that.
college last year, they may have been right at that time. Maybe nutrition isn't a science, but it sounds like it's, based on what you're saying tonight, it is becoming more of a science. It's becoming more studied. And instead of focusing on the next hot thing, what's going to get you skinny quick, is, okay, well, let's focus on you as an individual and not you compared to everybody else that's going on here, because what works for this person may not work for you.
Correct.
And let's start by trying to understand how your body works.
Correct. And, you know, being realistic on what you can do. And I think, you know, small steps and can make a huge difference in just getting healthy. And people want to, you know, do the extreme diets because they're thinking it's going to be a quick fix. And really it's, you know, just a Band-Aid.
Is that why you see these yo-yos of,
correct.
you know, losing 50 pounds, gaining 100, you know, is because
Yes.
they're not changing themselves. They're changing what they're doing temporarily.
It's with a temporary mindset. It's a short-term goal. And so you have a short-term mindset. And so if you want a long-term goal, you need a long-term mindset. And so that's where you make those small changes over time. You know, again, adding veggies in.
Well, yeah.
And you're making sure you're, you know, but making sure you're getting enough protein through the day. I mean, that's another thing that people think, oh, we overdo protein. Well, we overdo protein in certain ways, but we don't eat quality protein throughout the day. Most people skip breakfast and or lunch, or they're getting some carbs in those days. And then they eat this giant dinner with a ton of protein, maybe, you know, at the end of the day, versus spreading those calories out, getting a lot more combinations of foods in throughout the day. And I will constantly have people telling me, well, you know, I do really good all day. No, you're starving yourself all day. And, you know, we can go into the whole intermittent fasting thing
That was
another
going to be my
time,
next
too.
question.
Which isn't necessarily bad, but what you're putting in your body, you know, and the timing of when you eat still really matters. Working with your circadian rhythms, there's lots of factors that people will take, you know, one little snippet. They get the sound bite and they're like, okay, intermittent fasting. So I'm just not going to eat all day. I'll just eat dinner and then I'll be healthy. And I will tell you, the majority of my patients come in and they skip breakfast and they skip lunch. And so technically, maybe they think they're doing intermittent fasting, or they were drinking coffee with, you know, whatever sugars and stuff in their coffee. And so technically they're not fasting, or they're drinking soda, but they think that they're fasting, you know, so understanding the whole concept. And that's where.
See, I skip breakfast and lunch, but I have like 4 snacks in between dinner, you know?
Right.
I have like pre-breakfast, pre-lunch. I don't call it breakfast and lunch.
First breakfast, second breakfast.
Yeah, first breakfast, second breakfast. Yeah, I know how that is. I feel much more informed.
Good.
You've been absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
A great guest. I'd actually love to have you back on in the future as well.
I'd love to come back.
Hopefully you had fun, Paul.
I did.
No, this is probably a good stopping point because, you know, we've covered a lot of territory and got to end this at some point. So
We do, because we could probably, you brought up intermittent fasting. That's
Yeah,
another
yeah.
3 hours.
Exactly.
because then we got fasting and intermittent
yes.
fasting and
Yeah, there's
it
lots
goes
of
on.
topics.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Which is why I love my job.
Cheryl, one last time, you are with Figure Weight Loss. You're
Correct.
the dietitian, nutritionist there.
Correct.
You are 25.
Oh, I love you.
And and figureweightloss.com, I think you said.
Figureweightloss.com. Yes.
All right. And if you have any questions for Cheryl that you want us to pass along to her, or you have questions for us, don't forget to, send us an email at howwegotherejp@gmail.com. That's HWWEGOTHEREJP@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on all socials, Facebook, Instagram. Gonna try and get a little TikTok going here soon, but hey, that's actually pretty tough. And follow our podcast, give us a listen, tell your friends. Cheryl, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And if you want to have your boss listen to this and approve it, I think it'll be fine. But until next time, have a good one.